All right, this is Epictetus, the Complete Works, part 28. The first and most important kind of cleanliness is that of the soul, and the same goes for uncleanliness. But you'd find that what makes a soul unclean is different from what makes a body unclean. The only kind of uncleanliness you'd find in the case of the soul is what soils it for the performance of its functions. Now, the soul's functions are inclinations and disinclinations, desires and aversions, aptitude, purposefulness, and assent. So, what is it that makes the soul dirty and unclean in its performance of these functions? When it judges badly, that's all. It follows that uncleanliness of the soul consists in bad judgments. What it takes to clean it is the introduction of the right kind of judgments. And a clean soul is one that has the right kind of judgments. Only such a soul is immune to confusion and contamination in the performance of its functions. What should I pay attention to then? In the first place, to those universal principles of ours. You should have them at hand, and without them you shouldn't go to sleep, wake up, drink, eat, or mingle with others. The principles I mean are that no one is the master of someone else's will, and that good and bad are to be found nowhere else but in will. It follows that no one has the power either to procure something good for me or to make me experience something bad. I myself am the only one who has power over myself in these respects. With these principles as my secure foundation, what reason do I have to be troubled by external things? How could a tyrant, illness, poverty, or indication frighten me? But I've displeased so-and-so. Well, he's not an action of mine, is he? Nor a judgment of mine. No, so why should I care? But he's widely regarded as an important person. That's his concern, and the concern of those who think him so. However, there is a certain being whom I'm obliged to please, submit to, and obey, and that's God and myself secondarily. God has made me responsible for myself and has subordinated my will to no one but me, giving me standards to enable me to use it correctly. When I follow these standards, I pay no attention to anyone who contradicts me if the topic is syllogisms, and I don't concern myself with anyone at all if the topic is changing arguments. So why, where matters of great importance than arguments are concerned, do I get annoyed when people criticize me? What's the reason for this agitation? It must be because I'm a novice in this domain. I mean, knowledge in all its forms despises ignorance and ignorant people. And this goes not just for the sciences, but for the arts and crafts as well. Take any cobbler you like or any carpenter, and you'll find that he despises the common run of people when it comes to his work. First, then, we should have these principles at hand and do nothing without them. Our soul should be intent on this objective, to pursue nothing external, nothing that isn't ours, but as an Almighty has ordained to go all out in pursuit of things that are subject to will and accept everything else as it is given to us. And this is actually fragments, so I just finished discourses right there. Anyone who's dissatisfied with the circumstances assigned him by fortune is unskilled in the art of living, while anyone who nobly endures his circumstances and makes reasonable use of what they have to offer deserves to be called a good person. God has made some things up to us and other things not up to us. The best and most important things is up to us. It is, in fact, what perfects even God's life, and that is making use of impressions. When right use is made of impressions, the consequences are freedom, contentment, joy, self-possession, and in addition justice, obedience to the law, self-discipline, and virtue in general. Everything else he's made not up to us. So we too shall be of one mind with God, in keeping with the way he has divided things up. We should do all we can to lay claim to things that are up to us, but give authority over things that are not up to us, to the universe, and gladly surrender it to whatever it may need, which may ever be our children, our homeland, or our lives. Universal nature was and is and will be like this, and it's impossible for things to happen differently than they do now. And it's not only human beings and all other creatures of the earth who've been subject to this alteration and change, but even the gods, and by Zeus, the four elements themselves are altered and changed up and down. Earth becomes water, water becomes air, air in its turns changes into fire, and there's the same process from above downward. Anyone who undertakes to turn his mind into this direction and to persuade himself to accept the inevitable of his own accord will live a very measured and harmonious life. And this, they say, is how the minds of a fool and a wise man differ. A fool thinks that things which, when they first strike his mind, seem to be harsh and terrible, really are like that. And then, as if they were truly frightening, he goes on to give them his assent and his some word. This is the word of Stoics' use in their discussions of this issue. Whereas a sage experiences a brief and slight alteration of color of expressions, but then the some other word withholds his assent, and instead retains his conviction and the strength of the opinion he has always held about such impressions, as things that are not really frightening in the slightest, but cause fear with their misleading appearances and empty alarms. This is the idea, based on the teachings of the early Stoics, that we find expressed by the philosopher Epictetus in the work I mentioned. Again, Favorinus informs us that Epictetus used to say that there are two vices which are far more serious and offensive than all the others: lack of fortitude and lack of self-control. That is, when we fail to tolerate or endure the wrong that we ought to endure, or when we fail to resist things and pleasures that we ought to resist. And so Epictetus says, if someone were to take to heart the following two words and make them his watchword for governing and observing himself, he will, for the most part, be free of imperfections and will live a life of tranquility. In these two words, he used to say, it's some word I can't read, and it says bear and forbear. That was the translation of that word. He said that we must discover an art of assent, and in the domain of inclination must pay careful attention to make sure that every inclination is conditional, contributes to the common good, and is commensurated with the value of what it's an inclination for. He also said that we should avoid desire altogether and apply aversion to nothing unless it's up to us. It's my rotten luck that this has happened to me. On the contrary, it's my good luck that although this has happened to me, I feel no distress, since I'm unbruised by the present and unconcerned about the future. What happened could have happened to anyone, but not everyone could have carried on without letting it distressing him. So why regard the incident as a piece of bad luck, rather than seeing your avoidance of distress a piece of good luck? Do you generally describe a person as unlucky when his nature worked well? Or do you count it as a malfunction of the person's nature when it succeeds in securing the outcome it wanted? Well, you know from the studies what it is that human nature wants. Can what happened to you stop you from being fair, high-minded, moderate, conscientiousness, unhasty, honest, self-respecting, self-reliant, and so on, from possessing all the qualities which, when presented, enable a person's natural nature to be fulfilled? So then, whenever something happens that might cause you distress, remember to rely on the principles. This is not bad luck, but bearing it valiantly is good luck. And I actually think that's the end of it. This is the last video for me reading the highlighted parts. My next videos are going to be where I'm reading the letters or the little chapters that I highlighted that I think are the most important in this book. But I'm super proud that I finally went through this whole entire book. This was a big dream of mine to put this out on YouTube, to share this with other people. And so maybe it could help out other people the way that it helped out me.